Hello, I'm Paul Contos. I'm a musician, a woodwind player, saxophone, flutes, an educator, band director, conductor, producer, multimedia producer, mentor, clinician, guest artist in various locations. Sounds like a lot, but it's very similar to any other discipline, I suppose. A construction arts person may be a carpenter, a tile setter, an electrician, an architect. Somebody in the tech world may be a programmer, a developer, a gamer. So there's a lot of aspects to a career, and I've had a wonderful and a very enriching life in music, and I'm very grateful for so many opportunities that have come my way, and I'd like to tell you about some of those. And it's again, has been a very, very rich and rewarding life pursuit. And of course, in the arts, we know it's a constant pursuit, and I like to have the thought of it being almost like infinity. You never stop learning. So I learn every day, and that makes it marvelous, it makes it wonderful, and makes it exciting. I started musical endeavors about 8 years old, maybe in the 4th grade, and I am a very big proponent of music in the schools. I had a very wonderful early years of music in schools, and some wonderful music programs and music teachers and directors. I was very fortunate. Not everybody has that experience, but I guess that's what helped formulate in me a great desire to really work and improve music in the schools, and I'm a big fan of it. So, and it has turned out that I am involved in a lot of school music across the land, across the nation, and in various places in the world. So I appreciate those opportunities as well. Elementary school, what we call junior high or middle school, and high school and college. I just kind of came up in the grassroots with school music, and didn't have the luxury of a lot of fancy private lessons, but have had as I've continued with music. And and through school music, I was able to meet a host of wonderful colleagues, some of whom I still perform and play and record with. So it has afforded me a rich group of relationships that's very important in the arts and in music. Through school experiences, high school, and then on to college, where I played and met other wonderful, talented musicians, like I say, some of whom I still play with. Those relationships just keep flourishing and blossoming, and of course, as you meet new people in life, they just add to that cornucopia of relationships. I like to kind of describe it as using a metaphor of like throwing a pebble into a very still pond, where it generates that series of concentric circles. And with music, especially at an early age, I can remember a time, probably in 6th or 7th grade, when I started playing in garage bands and rock bands, pop bands, where our band manager, who was our friend, went before the student council and lobbied and got us another $6 to play at the school dance. And things kind of start from there. But I like to relate it as that series of circles that just broaden out in a pond. In the arts, along with a lot of other disciplines, you do your work, and if you work at it and practice and try to be diligent, someone else may hear of that, or hear or see your performance or your artwork, and then you may get a call, hey, I I heard you at the concert or that the dance or whatever it is, 2 weeks ago. Can you do something on the 19th of this month, and then that some other people hear and see you there, and that just grows and it amplifies, and I think that's been my situation for much of my life. I haven't really advertised very much. I don't have a website, although I promote that, and you really need to do that and be on social media to promote the work you're doing and let people know. But I think the core of it is just doing as much quality work as you possibly can, and then that just grows from there. And those people in my world, it was other musicians who maybe would appreciate some of the work that I'm doing, and then that word, if other artists and musicians acclaim another artist, then the public at large will maybe hear that and then believe that, and then your work continues throughout the world. So as I continued through college, I met a lot of people that I started playing professionally with, and I believe that in my heart, I also just had a desire for education. So I was teaching lessons even while I was taking lessons, and helping my colleagues and my peers, and maybe some musicians who are a little bit younger than me. I've had some wonderful, wonderful students that I still have great relationships throughout the world with. So I started teaching along with playing professionally and performing. I've been involved in many, many styles of music. My specialty is in the field of jazz music, but I also play classical. I've played lots of rock, pop, R&B, Motown, world music, lots of gospel music, which I love, and played in many, many gospel concerts, and was a staff woodwind player for a gospel record company, Maranatha Records, and so many styles. And I played with the Temptations, the Four Tops, a lot of funk and R&B bands, Latin jazz, and of course lots of jazz. I've had the opportunity to work with some of the greatest jazz musicians of all time, the great Dizzy Gillespie, Clark Terry, Wynton Marsalis, Branford Marsalis, Kurt Elling, Christian McBride, and a host of many, many others. And I appreciate those relationships too. And those interactions just have helped me to grow as a musician and as a performer and as a mentor and as a teacher. Many, many things I've done. And in music, one of the, I guess you could say, the benefits is that it has afforded me opportunities to do a fair amount of traveling through education and performance. I've traveled and played in many parts of Europe, all across the United States, Canada, many times in Japan. I've done about 20 or 21 tours of Japan. Recently returned from Brazil, where I've been 17 times, and performed at a jazz festival that has a large jazz educational component. Met some marvelous Brazilian musicians, and the trip I just returned from was great. The event I do is mostly in Sao Paulo, but I was able to travel to Rio de Janeiro and see some of the greatest, most beautiful sights. On my resume is one of the places I can remember is Tahiti, which is in French Polynesia. That's a place where normally I probably would never have visited or had the opportunity to go visit unless I made a point to on a vacation, but playing music there was fantastic. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever visited. So I've said this to students many times. It's not 200% true, but basically I like to think of the dynamic of if you're kind and you're good to music, music will be good to you. and that has proven itself a number of times in my life. If you just practice and you work hard, you're diligent, then some wonderful opportunities, whether it's great gigs or concerts or performances, maybe some travel opportunities, recording, and that's another field I've worked in. Besides playing in places like Carnegie Hall and the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., and many jazz festivals across the world, I was able to get into the recording aspect of music, which I do enjoy too. I love. It's very different from performing live, but recording, of course, is, needless to say, is such a big part of musical life. I serendipitously got into the beginnings of the digital music or digital audio revolution, or around the early 90s, at that time when things were changing and computers were becoming more ubiquitous, and software was, starting to really be the thing. I was able to get into some of the digital audio places and work with some of the tools and software. I worked for a company called Antares. Their famous product is very well known even to non-musicians. It's called Auto-Tune, and that is a software where you can align a voice track, and you can use software to tune up the track. And it's was first devised to just make vocals be more in tune. Then it was discovered that it could be used as an effect, and the rest is history. I remember I'm actually the very first person who demonstrated an auto-tune product at it's a very famous music trade show called the NAMM Show, and I was doing work for the company and developed some vocal tracks to use as demonstrations. I had a singer sing slightly out of tune, and would use that to show engineers and to musicians how it worked. And it was a few years after that I no longer worked with the company. I was in a convenience store in Japan, I think, and I heard that track. I think it might have been Cher or someone like that, where I just stopped in the aisle and said, "That sounds like auto-tune. Oh, they're using it as an effect." So I come across it once in a while. I'm not doing as much recording now, mostly in performance and education and mentoring, but it was a great part of my life, and I have recorded at Capitol Records in Hollywood, Angel Recording in London, Fantasy Records in Berkeley, Skywalker Ranch, which is George Lucas's recording facility in Marin. I'll actually be recording there in a couple of weeks. And so all these things have just added to, like I say, just a really rich casserole of musical life, which I'm very grateful for. In addition to those things, I'll mention that I have received some various grants for musical endeavors. The National Endowment for the Arts, I've received 3 individual performer grants, and I've been on the roster of artists in residence for the California Arts Council, and have garnered a few awards and things along the way. But mostly it's just the rich relationships with the people that I work with, students, other colleagues, musical performers, and those who love music, and that's really been such a rewarding thing for my life. I think I'll play a little piece and just demonstrate. This is the alto saxophone. Oh, that's a excerpt of a piece entitled Body and Soul. It goes back to the 1930s. So I hope some of that has maybe motivated you or let you know some of the various things that a musician can do. I have also been teaching for many, many years, but in addition to private lessons. I'm the education director at the Monterey Jazz Festival. I taught at Cal State Monterey Bay for 12 years, teaching mostly the recording arts, music technology and the recording arts. I still am teaching at the University of California, Santa Cruz. I'm a lecturer in saxophone there, and I did a little stint of teaching recording arts at Monterey Peninsula College. So teaching and mentoring has been a really very, very large part of my life. And I want to thank you for just hearing me and talking about my life in music.